Chest up, shoulders back. Welcome to Revival Fitness, everybody, your home for gains and brains. And today, guys, we're going to talk about some bread and butter, perhaps literally, but one of the bread and butter topics on this channel. You guys know I am the Bulk King, and today I'm going to give you guys 6 big reasons why people claim that bulking doesn't work, why it made them fat, why it's not necessary, why it's unhealthy. All of these points people have against it. Some of them who are well-intentioned and just simply have never done it properly. Others who are blatantly lying to you about it to keep you stuck in novice purgatory and consuming their content and buying their products. Regardless though, after this video, you are going to know how to bulk properly, effectively, and you're going to reap the benefits of doing so. If you are a current or former main gainer, if you've been recomping, spinning your wheels at the same body weight for a long time, it's time to get you on the right track. So with that said, let's get started with point number 1 here, the first bulking mistake: obsessing over a specific weight gain. Now, of course, in a bulking phase, guys, your body weight is going to be rising. That's one of the main purposes of the bulking phase, ultimately the cornerstone of it. However, I see this repeatedly. People like to frame bulking as if you're going to gain a set amount of body weight every single week. And I'm here to tell you that is probably not going to be the case. So on one end of the spectrum, we have guys who are scared of their body weight going up at all. Man, I was at 130, 140 pounds, 150 pounds, and I was just so scared of my weight going up. So that's the one end of this equation. But the other end are guys who think that if their body weight is not going up by a set number every single time they look at the scale, they need to just continually bump up the food intake. And that is not the right way to go about this. In this assumption that you are going to gain a set amount of weight in a given time, this is exactly what the bulking fearmongers use to scare people away from it. Greg Doucette's always going on about this. Well, it takes 3,500 calories surplus a week to gain 1 pound of body weight. If you gain 1 pound of body weight in bulk for 52 weeks over a whole year, that means you're going to gain 52 pounds in a year. That means you're going to be obese. Even if you give 2 different people the same number of so-called calories, and even if their macros are totally identical, one person is not going to have the exact same rate of gain or loss as another person. And it's ridiculous because you watch these guys online, all these alleged experts, what do they say every single time? Oh, it's the first law of thermodynamics. Keiko is proven by the first law of thermodynamics, right? They go on this over and over and over. They always beat this drum. 99% of the guys saying that don't even know what the first law of thermodynamics is. The first law of thermodynamics applies to what you would call a closed system, e.g. a machine. The human body, guys, is not a closed machine. It's an open system. We have metabolism at play, the endocrine system, hormones, all this other stuff. Our body does not operate in the same way as a turbine engine or something like that. And I'm obviously not saying here that you're going to be able to just bulk your face off for 2 years and somehow maintain or lose weight, or vice versa. However, you cannot guarantee that you or anybody else is going to gain or lose an exact amount of body fat, body mass, water retention, any of this stuff. You cannot guarantee that based on perceived caloric intake and expenditure. And on top of that too, I have an old video why tracking calories is not as easy as you've been told. Because so many people online just say, oh, input your stuff into MyFitnessPal and then put in your little multiplier and you're good to go. It is not that simple.
The numbers, basically. What do they mean?
As you are building muscle, your overall metabolism is going to increase as well. That can start to slow things down. Depending on the food quality that you're eating, we're going to talk about that later on, that also can affect things. You might have certain types of allergies or reactions to specific types of foods. Your body's not able to fully process them. You can't really get the nutrient benefits from them. All this stuff comes into play, guys. But to just put it into layman's terms, think about me as an example. I started my bulk in the summer of 2020. I was 165 or 167 pounds, somewhere in that range. I finished the bulk at my peak at 190 pounds. Over 500 days later, it was a 1.5 year long bulk. I was in an estimated surplus of at least 500 calories that entire time. If that's the case, guys, how come my body weight only went from 167 to 190? How come I did not gain, according to the math we've been told, I should have gained 78 pounds. That is a year and a half, and I bulked for a little bit longer, but let's just say there, 52 weeks and 26 is 78. How come I did not gain 78 pounds of body weight in that time? Now, the rebuttal to this is going to be, oh, well, you just didn't calculate properly. If you actually were in a 500 surplus, you would have gained all of that body weight. Even though, like I said, I overshot the surplus estimate, I was working from home most of that time. I was not extremely active during the day. I was not doing heavy-duty cardio or anything. You guys are going to have to take the L, dude. So I don't want to keep harping on this point, guys, but please understand that. You cannot guarantee you're going to gain 1 pound a week, 2 pounds a week, 2 or 3 pounds a month, all this stuff. If your body weight is slowly rising, your lifts are slowly rising, slowly but surely. Maybe at the beginning you get a little bit of a spike because you're entering that surplus mode. You're good to go. Not extreme like the do-set fallacy, oh, you're gonna get really fat and obese and hate yourself and then cut down and get too lean. No, it's nice and easy like this. It's not like this. But as alluded to, that leads us into the second major point here, the second bulking mistake, falling for conventional bodybuilding myths. So as I said a minute ago, guys, so many dudes, when it comes to the bulk, they're only focused on, oh, is the scale going up? Is the scale going up? They don't really consider and thoughtfully kind of program how their own lifts are going up. Guys go in the gym, they go on the machine every single week, 2 plates aside. Or they go to do their bench press 185 over and over and over and over. And then maybe 1 week they randomly get giddy and decide to go for a 225 PR.
There is no passion, there is no vision, there is no aggression.
And I'm going to keep hammering this point home, guys, because a lot of you dudes still can't grasp this concept. But training for strength versus size, or I'm sorry, not size, hypertrophy, these are not extremely different concepts. I love whenever guys like to cope about their own lack of progress by saying, oh, well, I train purely for hypertrophy, I don't train for strength. If you're progressively overloading, guys, you are training for strength. You might not be training for all-out 1 rep max strength, which is not even necessary, unless you're a powerlifter or something like that, but even so, you do have to get stronger to get bigger. And once your overall strength ceiling starts to be hit, the only way to really improve that, aside from technique fixes, is to add more muscle to your frame. It's a symbiotic relationship. I'm not the strongest guy in the world, but you guys need to get over this concept that you have to like specialize in strength to hit mid-intermediate numbers on your lifts. It doesn't work that way, man. If your overall training is effective, if you're using your entire body, if you're not doing too much volume, too much intensity, which is a lot of the problem in many cases. A lot of these guys think that just because they're bulking, oh, I can double the volume I'm doing, or go to the gym 6 or 7 days a week. Your body and muscles still need time to recover to properly put the extra food to use. While there are differences in specific rep ranges and technique to some extent, size fundamentally is derived from strength, guys, and vice versa. How many times have you talked to a friend or a guy in your gym and he says, yeah man, I just go in the gym and pick a weight and I just rep it out. They have no real plan, no real progression scheme, they just do what feels good. If you ever hear somebody say that about their training, guys, and not in the terms of one exercise position or slot or adjusting their form, but their overall training philosophy, if their entire philosophy boils down to, I just do what feels good, man, I do what feels best, that's code for I don't know what I'm doing. But assuming that you have seen the light and you are distancing yourself from a lot of these bodybuilding myths, a lot of guys are going to enter their, as I call it, barbell supremacist stage and go back to the basics. But that does bring its own set of issues if you take that too far. Which is why the third mistake here is minimalist programming. And these are all going to be big compound movements. And I've said over and over, guys, those should be the cornerstone of your program. Those should be kind of the base levels of your pyramid. But a lot of these plans are going to lack direct shoulder work, direct arm work, abs, a lot of times things like the hamstrings. You're going to have a lot of weak spots that you're not going to be able to really fill in if you're doing these bare bones systems. So we bulk to gain muscle as quickly as possible, yes. But if you're only doing a handful of total exercises per week, you're limiting your overall variation, movement patterns, things like that, you are going to be leaving gains on the table. And I would argue as well that just because a lot of the proven bare bones systems can work, that doesn't mean that they're perfect and that they can't be modified. So I don't believe that your noob gains are going to happen any slower or take a hit in any way if you throw in additional direct work, as we talked about here. But in the majority of cases, if you're a beginner, I think anywhere from 9 up to maybe 11 or 12 sets per muscle group per week is all you should need if you're training with sufficient intensity, not sandbagging your exercises. Click my video in the top right, guys, about volume and intensity. I break it all down there, but you don't need an extreme amount of either in the literal sense to make great progress. So we are halfway through this video. We've covered 3 points and there are 3 left. But before we get to those, ladies and gentlemen, it's the algorithm. So this leads us into point number 4 here, and this one's going to anger a lot of you, just a heads up. But it is taking mainstream diet advice. People still love to have the appeal to authority, and they say, oh, well, this organization recommends this, and they say this isn't healthy, this is healthy. This is not the mindset you want to have, guys, just loosely speaking in many cases for your diet, but especially when it comes to adding serious muscle mass. So what I'm going to put on the screen now, guys, is a graphic from the new Tufts College food ranking system. So on this list, as you can see here, the bars in green are what they deem the most healthy so-called foods. Down at the bottom in the red are what they deem the most unhealthy. So on this list are 53 General Mills cereals. They describe all as healthier than cheddar cheese, milk, and eggs cooked in butter, and even eggs in general. And these include the Dora the Explorer cereal, Berry Burst Cheerios, Count Chocula, Lucky Charms, and Chex Chocolate. Even a basic chicken fillet that is grilled is ranked as 50 on this list, while Cheerios are ranked as a 95. Reese's Puffs are a 71, as are chocolate Cheerios on this list, making them far healthier to eat than chicken, and way, way, way healthier than ground beef at the bottom, which got a 26 rating. You guys may be surprised to know that General Mills is a funder of the Tufts Food Institute. The current dietary guidelines are an absolute joke. The vast majority of them are not based in any real science. A lot of them, as well, as we saw in the prior example, they are funded by cereal companies and grain companies and people with ulterior motives. I'm not going to go into it all now, guys, but you can look this up. This is not some conspiracy. This is well-known information if you actually care to look for it. As if that wasn't bad enough, think about the fact that most dietary guidelines and advice are geared toward people, the unwashed masses, who need to lose a considerable amount of weight. If you are bulking, you do not fit into that category. So a common example is the 2,000 calories per day recommendation, which, again, I'm not sure how they exactly come to that conclusion, but they say 2,000. And then guys are going to ask me a lot of the time, they'll say, hey man, I saw it was 2,000 recommended for a healthy weight. Can I go in a 2,100 surplus? So as I tell you guys a lot on this channel, your food quality matters. There are so many videos online, and a lot of the time they're just one-off things to get a lot of views, I understand that. But some of these people, man, you watch their full day of eating. A lot of these so-called fitness professionals now, I'll just say it, they eat like children. They are sugar addicts, right? They're always trying to find ways to just shoehorn more sugar into their diet. It might come in the form of sweeteners and stuff that are 0 calorie, but they get that little rush from it. A lot of people have a very hard time eating truly clean. And I understand this point when it comes to bulking, because if you are only eating pure clean foods, you might not be able to hit your overall surplus. But even so, guys, you do want to make sure the vast majority of the food you are eating is whole food, minimally processed, 1 or only 2 or 3 perhaps ingredients to it. If you need to throw in a little bit of ice cream or fast food here and there to meet your caloric goal, that's fine, guys. But if those things are a cornerstone of your diet that you're eating every single day, I think you need to reconsider things. But if you are going to follow the mainstream guidelines, it's going to be harder for you to hit your overall food intake goal. One of the biggest reasons being, fat is still demonized widespread. And saturated fat, of course, is always the main culprit. A lot of guidelines nowadays tell you outright to avoid eating meat, and they're going to start pushing you the Beyond Burger and all this other slop for it. But if they do say eating meat is okay, they're always going to say the same thing. Make sure it's lean meat, avoid red meat like it's the plague. The same thing can be applied to dairy. If you're going to eat dairy, they say, oh, make sure that it's very low or no fat for the best results, all this other stuff. Not only are you removing a high amount of the vitamins and minerals in these foods whenever you remove the fat, because the fat is where they're all found. For example, the yolks in eggs, the fat in milk, the fat in meat, etc. Let's assume that you don't even care about the vitamins and minerals. Let's just say they're off the table for now. You are going to not get nearly as many calories in your diet if you remove the fat from it. Fat is more calorically dense per gram than protein or carbs, so if you're removing or really limiting high-fat sources of food in your diet, guys, you're going to make bulking harder than it needs to be if you do not have a big appetite genetically. And the last thing to consider here, at least that I can think of right now, is eating very high fiber. And this relates back to the prior point. The mainstream dietary advice is geared toward people who are heavy. They need to suppress their appetite, and fiber is one way to do that. So carb sources that are higher in fiber are by default harder to overeat because the body can't really even digest fiber. It ends up turning into bulk, it takes up space in the stomach, and this leads to delayed hunger signaling. People with genetically very high appetites, a lot of the times they don't even have to consciously bulk, because if left to their own devices, they will be in a surplus and gain fat more easy by default. But when it comes to the skinny guys and to the hard gainers, you're going to have to work as hard at eating in a surplus as the other person is at consciously eating less. And that brings us on to the fifth bulking mistake a lot of guys make: issues with their surplus. And there are two sides of this coin. Muscle mass accumulated over years of training. Somebody who has more muscle mass is going to expend more energy simply existing than somebody who does not have that muscle mass. But the point stands, a surplus can be overdone or underdone. So in a lot of old school fitness folklore, I don't think this is as common now, but guys would be on surpluses of 1,000 estimated or more a day. You may commonly hear the phrase, just eat whatever you can find, eat whatever's in front of you, stuff your face until you can't, right? And for some guys, bulking might feel that way, the low appetite having guys. Eating 3,500 calories a day might feel to you like you're force feeding and it's painful and everything, but it can always be worse if you think about it. So if you're having trouble getting enough food down, liquid sources of food are a good bet if you can tolerate dairy. Milk is something good to have. Maybe protein shakes. So if you're very naturally slim, I'm not going to say outright just eat whatever's in front of you, because there's far too much junk food and processed garbage out here now to advocate to do that, but you may have to eat a lot, more than is comfortable for you. For some guys who fit the criteria I mentioned, they may have to do that to steadily gain weight. You're going to have to eat until the point where it becomes a chore. On the opposite end of the spectrum, though, there are some people who, if they get even a little bit too lenient on their diet, and keep in mind, bulking is also a diet, it's not just cutting. If they get too lenient, they can start to spill over faster than they would like to. So as I've said before, guys, I consider a 200 estimated surplus, that is the minimum I think you're going to see tangible results at. I think it's also the minimum that you can really guarantee you're even in a noticeable surplus, given everything we talked about before too. But I think plus 200 is the point where you should be starting. Some guys on that, they're going to be gaining fine. Other guys, if they do plus 200, they might say they barely notice a difference, not a whole lot is changing. They could be better suited to do 400 to 500. But any surplus, guys, that is only 2 digits, not going to work out for you very well. So while both of these things can present problems, guys, I would rather you eat too much of a surplus and then simply dial it back down than to do the 30-calorie surplus for months and months and say, how come nothing's really happening? You're essentially doing a glorified recomp at that point. I think upping it by 200, that's my general rule, is what you should do. But if you're starting from 30 and then you up it to 230, It's not a real difference. And that brings us on to the sixth and final bulking mistake. Bulking when you don't need to. So I get a lot of questions from guys asking if they should bulk or if they should stay at their current level, etc. Should they cut? All of you watching, I don't know what your circumstance is, what your physique looks like, etc. I obviously can't answer that for you. If you want to get in direct contact with me, you can via Patreon. That's probably the best way to do so for ongoing DM with me. But loosely speaking, for men, I would say about the 20% body fat point is when you either don't need to bulk, or if you have been bulking up to that point, you probably can cap it off there. So for women, this is probably going to be around 30% body fat or so, because they're about 10% higher, loosely speaking. If you're at a point where your body mass index is, say, 25 or above, and you have no real muscle built to this point, you probably could recomp for a period. I have an old video, it's called Are You Skinny Fat or Just Fat? I believe I break it down there. As well as another video called I Promote Bulking, but What If You're Already Fat? I discussed this in more detail in those two videos, so be sure to check those out too. But there are scenarios in which bulking is just not necessary for people, but they either will continue because they just want to bloat max and keep hitting PRs. More power to you, go ahead. But most people don't want to do that, and in those scenarios, bulking is going to give you some benefits, of course, but you're probably going to spill over too much, and that's whenever people start to give it a bad name. Well, bulking only made me fat, I didn't get that much more results, I got just as many results whenever I was recompositioning. That can be the case if you're in a position where you don't need to bulk, as it is. So check out those two videos I mentioned, guys, there's more context there, but bulking is not for everybody at all times. I think if you're a serious lifter and you get down to a reasonable weight, it's going to be inevitable for most people, but not everybody needs to be bulking all the time. That's one of the common misnomers people say about me. It's one of like the straw men. Oh, he says to just bulk and bulk and bulk. If you need to and will benefit from it, yes, but that's not all of you. But this video has gone on for too long, I think, at this point, guys, so we're going to end it here. Thank you very much for watching. A big shout out, as always, to the Patreon supporters and the channel members. As I said, get in contact with me there to get your own questions answered and inquire about online coaching and programs as well. Be sure to check out the links down below to save on some great products and services. And I will catch you guys next time.